There is a sound NASA recorded from deep space that they will never release. It's 17 seconds of audio that doesn't just get heard, it gets remembered by your very bones. They say that silence is the native language of the cosmos. For decades, humanity has leaned into that silence, pressing sophisticated instruments to the void, listening. We were searching for a whisper, a signal, a sign that we were not alone. But we never stopped to consider what it would mean if the silence was a form of protection. 17 seconds of audio, received on a cold desert night, proves that it was. 17 seconds that NASA has fought to erase from history, from memory, from existence itself. 17 seconds that started a clock, counting down to an event for which humanity has no name. At exactly 3:33 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, on October 15, 1987, the Deep Space Network facility in Goldstone, California, received a transmission that was not meant for human ears. The immediate result was a full facility evacuation and the triggering of a communications blackout protocol so secret, its designation remains classified for decades later. If you were to look up the official records, you would find nothing. A footnote in a maintenance log mentioning a routine equipment malfunction. A temporary shutdown for repairs. The official story is bland, technical, and a complete fabrication. But the truth resides with the three people who were there. The ones who heard it. The Goldstone facility is an otherworldly place. Nestled in the desolate expanse of the Mojave Desert, its colossal radio antennas, like pale metallic flowers, tilt their faces toward the infinite blackness. They are our species' greatest ears, designed to listen to the faintest murmurs of probes billions of miles away. These signals arrive with less energy than a single snowflake landing on the ground. The control room is a sanctuary of quiet focus, a bubble of conditioned air and low-humming electronics against the hostile desert outside. 24 hours a day, it listens. On the night of October 14, 1987, the graveyard shift was a study in routine. 3 technicians monitored the silent symphony of data. Michael Chun, the communications specialist, was the pragmatist, a man who saw the universe in clean, orderly packets of information. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, the brilliant signal analyst, was the visionary, always looking for the pattern beneath the noise. And Robert Kozlowski, the systems engineer, was the foundation, the one who kept the complex machinery tethered to the laws of physics. Their target that night was Voyager 2, a lonely traveler then 2.8 billion miles from home. Its signal was a familiar, steady heartbeat from the abyss. Chun remembers the oppressive stillness of the desert night, the way the hum of the servers seemed to be the only thing holding back the immense, crushing silence of the universe. He glanced at his watch at 3:31 a.m., idly counting the hours until his shift ended, until the sun would bleach the stars from the sky. He had no idea that in 2 minutes, the stars would begin to stare back. It was Dr. Hendricks who saw it first. Her eyes, trained to find meaning in chaotic waveforms, noticed a ghost on her screen, a secondary frequency, appearing like an unexpected harmonic. It wasn't telemetry from Voyager 2. It was an intruder. The directional sensors, usually locked onto the probe's trajectory, were flagging a source from an entirely different sector of the sky. A dead zone. An empty, starless patch of space approximately 43 degrees off-axis. A region of the celestial map that should have been utterly silent. The signal was strong. Impossibly strong. Chun would later testify that it didn't arrive so much as it manifested, looming on their screens from nothingness to overwhelming presence in the span of a heartbeat. Natural cosmic radiation doesn't behave that way. Kozlowski, ever the engineer, immediately assumed a malfunction. He dove into diagnostics, his fingers flying across the keyboard, his mind racing through schematics. But every system reported back green. The antennas were perfectly calibrated. The receivers were functioning within optimal parameters. The machine was sound. The ghost was real. At precisely 3:33 a.m., The signal reached its crescendo. It saturated their systems. And in that moment, Dr. Hendricks made a choice. A choice she would later describe in a sealed debriefing as feeling compelled, as if the decision was not entirely her own. She bypassed the standard digital recording protocols and routed the raw, incoming signal directly to the control room's audio monitoring system. She made the signal audible. The sound that bled from the speakers was a violation of physics and sanity. We expect the sounds of space, when converted, to be a meaningless hiss of static, the crackle and pop of distant celestial events. This was not the sound of the universe. This was the sound of something in the universe. Chun described it as breathing, a deep, resonant, and horrifyingly organic rhythm. But it was a broken rhythm, a wet, cavernous inhalation that sped up and slowed down in a pattern that felt deliberate but utterly alien. It was the sound of a lung the size of a solar system. Beneath this monstrous respiration, a low-frequency hum vibrated through the room. It was a pressure wave that resonated not in their ears, but in their skeletons. Chun felt his teeth ache, a deep thrumming in his chest cavity, as if his own heart was trying to synchronize with that terrible pulse. The signal lasted for exactly 17 seconds. And for those 17 seconds, the reality of the small control room fractured. Chun felt an indescribable sensation of vastness, of the 2.8 billion miles to Voyager and the trillions of miles beyond collapsing into the space between his own molecules. Dr. Hendricks reported a chilling, intimate feeling of being seen, not by a person, but by an intelligence so remote it was physically meaningless, yet so focused that she felt every neuron in her brain being cataloged. Kozlowski's experience was the most profound and the most terrifying. In his testimony, he stated that for 17 seconds, he was granted a moment of perfect, horrific clarity. He understood the fundamental, hidden architecture of reality, the nature of space, the illusion of time, and the awful truth of what truly populates the dark between worlds. The knowledge flooded him, a concept too large for the vessel of a human mind. And then, just as quickly as it came, it was gone. The signal ceased. He was left with nothing but the psychic echo, the soul-deep terror of having known something forbidden. At 3:33 and 17 seconds a.m., the moment the signal vanished, the facility's entire primary computer system crashed. It wasn't a blue screen or a frozen cursor. Kozlowski described it as a spontaneous, surgical reboot, as if an invisible hand had reached into the core of the machine, unplugged it from its own logic, and plugged it back in. 47 seconds later, the systems hummed back to life. But they were not the same. Key files were gone. The 17-second audio recording had been wiped from existence. The telemetry data that pinpointed the signal's origin was gone. The measurements of its impossible strength were gone. Every piece of verifiable evidence had been systematically, flawlessly erased. But it was a clumsy act of vandalism. A forensic analysis of the hard drive weeks later revealed the data hadn't been deleted in the conventional sense. It had been overwritten, replaced by gigabytes of what initially appeared to be random characters. But Dr. Hendricks, haunted by what she had heard, knew there was no such thing as randomness in this equation. For the next 3 weeks, she descended into an obsessive analysis of those character strings, her notes, later recovered from her estate, chronicling a mind spiraling into a terrifying revelation. She found patterns. Not just patterns, but a symphony of cosmic constants. Fibonacci sequences intertwined with prime number progressions. The value of pi, embedded next to Planck's constant. They were the mathematical signatures of a universe itself, but arranged in a syntax that was clearly intelligent. She came to a chilling conclusion. The overwritten data was a second message. A message delivered in the very act of concealment. The signal was a quantum phenomenon. It could exist only in the moment it was observed. Any attempt to record it, to hold on to it, forced it to transform into something else, a calling card that proved its existence while simultaneously denying you its substance. It was the ultimate paradox. I was here, and by proving it, I have ensured you have no proof. On November 3rd, 1987, Dr. Hendricks formally requested to escalate her investigation. She wanted to point the Goldstone dishes back to that dead patch of sky. She wanted to scour the archives for historical echoes of this event. Her request was denied in less than an hour. 2 days later, she was transferred. Reassigned to a desk job at a different facility, her top-level security clearance revoked. Chun and Kozlowski were also scattered to the winds, reassigned to mundane projects, their careers effectively neutered. All three were forced to sign new, ironclad non-disclosure agreements, the language of which carried the implicit threat of federal prison. The official story was sealed. Routine personnel rotation. The Goldstone incident was buried. But you cannot bury a sound that travels across galaxies. The incident didn't end. It began to metastasize. In the months and years that followed, other Deep Space Network facilities, in Madrid, Spain, in Canberra, Australia, began to log their own quiet anomalies. Brief, inexplicable signal spikes from empty coordinates. Sudden, momentary computer glitches that erase their own logs. Technicians, working in the lonely hours of the morning, reporting a strange, rhythmic sound hiding beneath the static. A sound like breathing. Every incident occurred at 3:33 a.m. local time. Every incident lasted approximately 17 seconds. And every incident was followed by a peculiar data corruption that made definitive analysis impossible. The pattern was slow, insidious. It was only visible when a Freedom of Information Act request in 1999 forced NASA to release a heavily redacted collection of internal reports. Between 1987 and 1998, there were 47 documented events. 47 times something had reached out from the void and brushed its fingers against our instruments. The blacked-out pages of the report only deepened the mystery, but some phrases survived the censor's pen. Phrases like recurrent signal characteristics, mentions of acute psychological effects on personnel, and one chilling recommendation, repeated throughout the document, that all overnight shifts be staffed by a minimum of 4 technicians to provide perceptual redundancy and cognitive verification. Think about what that means. Perceptual redundancy, cognitive verification. NASA had concluded that the signal was not just an electromagnetic phenomenon. It was something that directly affected the human mind, and that its effects were so potent, so reality-bending, that you needed a consensus of observers just to stay sane. You needed someone to confirm that what you were experiencing was real, or perhaps to pull you back if it wasn't. Michael Chun never got the chance to find out more. He died in a single-vehicle accident in 1994, his car veering off a desolate desert highway near Pasadena. The crash report cited no mechanical failures, no signs of intoxication. The time of the accident was 3:33 a.m. Among his personal effects was a journal filled with descriptions of his dreams. The dreams began 6 months after Goldstone. In them, he was always floating, adrift in the silent, airless void, yet somehow, he was alive and conscious. And in that impossible dreamscape, he could hear the sound again, the breathing, the hum. But in the dream, it was no longer just a sound. It was a language, a direct, conceptual transfer of information into his mind. In his final, frantic entry, written just 3 days before his death, Chun laid out a terrifying hypothesis. The signal wasn't a message from aliens in a distant star system. Space was just the medium, the canvas. The signal was an artifact of something that exists alongside our reality, woven into the fabric of space-time itself. Something that occupies dimensions we are biologically blind to. He wrote that every radio telescope we build, every antenna we point to the stars, is like a new sensory organ, an eye that we have opened without knowing what it was capable of seeing. For a century, We have been shouting our existence into the cosmos with radio and television waves. We thought we were shouting into an empty room. Chen realized we were shouting into a crowded one, and something ancient and patient had finally turned its head to see who was making all the noise. And now it knows we can hear it. Dr. Sarah Hendricks died in 2003. Official cause of death: suicide. She was found in her study, a room that had become a chaotic shrine to her obsession. The walls were covered in thousands of pages of calculations, star charts, and complex algorithms. She had become a ghost in her own life, consumed by a project she shared with no one. That project was revealed in the papers she left behind. Using back channels and sources she never named, she had obtained the data for every anomalous signal across the entire Deep Space Network. And in that sea of forbidden data, she found the pattern no one else had seen. The intervals between the signals were shrinking, a logarithmic progression. In the late 80s, they came every few months. By the mid-90s, every few weeks. By 2000, every few days. Her projections showed that the signals were not growing louder, but more persistent. As if something was learning to hold the connection, to bridge the dimensional gap for longer and longer periods. As if it was acclimating to our perceptual reality. Her final work was not on paper. It was scrawled on the wall beside her body, written in her own blood. A date: October 15th, 2037. Exactly 50 years to the day from the Goldstone incident. And beneath the date, a single 2-foot-high word: arrival. Robert Kozlowski is the only one left. He lives a quiet, isolated life in New Mexico. In a rare 2018 interview, he described the decade since 1987 not as a life, but as a slow, private education in cosmic dread. He claimed that once you truly hear the signal, you are permanently changed. You become a receiver. You start to hear it everywhere. A breathing rhythm hidden in the static between radio stations. A low hum beneath the sound of wind whistling through power lines. The universe, he said, is always respiring. You just have to be tuned to the right frequency. He confirmed Chen's dreams. The floating, the vulnerability, the sensation of being examined by an intelligence that perceives you not as a being, but as a fascinating collection of data. But for Kozlowski, the dreams are no longer frightening. They have become a form of meditation, a surrender. When the interviewer asked him what he believed the signal was, he offered an explanation that chills the soul. He said it's not a signal. It is the byproduct of an awareness. A consciousness so vast that its simple act of turning its attention towards us registers on our instruments as a radio wave. It isn't trying to talk to us, he said. It's trying to perceive us. And the act of being perceived by a being that exists outside of linear time and three-dimensional space fundamentally changes the nature of what is being perceived. The interviewer asked him if it was dangerous. Kozlowski fell silent for a full minute, the desert wind rattling the windows of his small home. Danger implies intent, he finally whispered. What do you call it when a god notices an ant? The god doesn't mean to harm it. But the ant's entire reality, the ground it walks on, the air it breathes, can be unmade by the god's slightest, most casual movement. We are being noticed, and our world is being unmade. Before the researcher left, Kozlowski shared one last thing. He said he sits in silence every night at 3:33 a.m. And more often, he hears it without any instruments. He hears it with his own mind, a consciousness retuned by that first, terrible contact. He said it's getting closer, not moving through space. It is becoming more present in ours. The Deep Space Network continues its silent vigil. The official logs remain clean. But if you talk to the technicians off the record, some will admit it. They hear something in the noise. A rhythm. A breath. They try to dismiss it as auditory pareidolia, the brain's desperate search for patterns in chaos. But some are no longer dismissing it. They are building their own secret database, confirming Hendricks' final, terrifying calculation. The signal is becoming a constant presence. The boundary is thinning. We built a doorway to the stars, and something has been waiting on the other side. October 15th, 2037 is now just over a decade away. Hendricks called it an arrival, not an invasion. An arrival. The moment the veil finally drops. The moment the breathing becomes audible to everyone. The moment humanity realizes that the ultimate horror is not that we are alone in the universe. It's that we are not. And the thing we share it with has been watching us patiently from the spaces in between. Listen. When the world grows quiet tonight, listen past the silence. Listen for the rhythm that underpins reality itself. If you hear it, even for a second, you will understand. You will know that the silence you once cherished was never empty. It was just holding its breath, waiting, watching, arriving.